right, Robby, what's on your radar today?
Well, Brianna, Havana Syndrome, an alleged malady that purportedly affects U.S. intelligence and military officials, is back in the news this week thanks to an investigative report by 60 Minutes. The report was accompanied by a big, splashy headline, Russian nexus revealed during 60 Minutes Havana Syndrome investigation into potential attacks on U.S. officials. That's right, CBS has decided that the mysterious ailments, headaches, earaches, etc., afflicting some American service personnel are perhaps best explained by a secretive Russian program to create energy weapons. Sinister. The 60 Minutes report begins by interviewing Carrie, an FBI agent who claims that she was struck by just such an energy weapon while at home in Florida. Host Scott Pelley, providing narrative voiceover, explains that in order to protect her identity, CBS is redacting her full name and disguising her appearance. This is Carrie.
One of them is Carrie. We're disguising her and not using her last name because she's still an FBI agent working in counterintelligence. She says in 2021, she was home in Florida when she was hit by a crippling force.
As pointed out by numerous commentators, as well as BuzzFeed News, Carrie's disguise is pretty inadequate, will not protect her identity in any meaningful way. What were they thinking? This is hardly the only thing wrong with the report, by the way, which combines breathless alarmism about foreign malfeasance with a healthy dose of outright science fiction. Energy beams in order to advance the mainstream media's favorite James Bond-esque narrative, everything is Russia's fault. Russia, Russia, Russia. Quote, the one thread common among most, if not all, of my clients, says Mark Zed, an attorney who represents alleged Havana Syndrome victims and was interviewed by 60 Minutes, is that they were all doing something relating to Russia. So let's back up here. Havana Syndrome was first reported by a CIA officer stationed in Havana who went to the U.S. Embassy there to complain about headaches and hearing loss. Dozens more people reported similar symptoms tied to a mysterious noise. This noise was not produced by some kind of sonic weapon. However, it turned out to be crickets. Literal crickets, the bugs. Yet, this did not put Havana Syndrome panic to rest, even though subsequent analysis by medical experts and U.S. intelligence suggests that the condition is not real. The CIA concluded in 2022 that the symptoms described by various officials were not caused by a sustained global campaign by a hostile power. The FBI's analysis was that Havana Syndrome is, quote, a mass sociogenic illness, which does sound pretty scary, but actually just means that the symptoms are essentially caused by social contagion under conditions of extreme stress, paranoia, and among members of an insular community, like intelligence officials. Writer Natalie Shore, who we've interviewed here on Rising in the past, likened it to demonic fits experienced by girls during the Salem witch trials. She writes, it means that the perceived diagnosis spreads socially, almost like an infectious pathogen would, with symptoms either triggered, exacerbated, or wrongly ascribed to a phony cause. She wrote in a November 2021 piece for Slow Boring, people experience various maladies all the time, and the cause is not always clear. According to Schur, the idea that a directed energy ray could produce the described symptoms without burning the victim's skin or frying their internal organs should be met with intense skepticism. She writes, there's no reason to believe the Russian government is responsible for Havana Syndrome because there is absolutely no reason to believe that it's a distinct, novel disease inflicted by an outside force of any kind. So here we are. Now, intelligence officials are capable of making mistakes, of course. See the Iraq War. The scientific consensus often misses important facts. See COVID-19. But the vast majority of experts here who've looked into Havana Syndrome concluded fairly uniformly that a hostile foreign power is not afflicting people with these symptoms. We ought to treat this as a fairly robust baseline assumption. Now, that does not mean the alleged victims are faking their symptoms, but just that the symptoms are incredibly common and can be explained by any number of other things. Now, given all this, I was surprised that the 60 Minutes report did not generate more immediate skepticism. On the contrary, National Review penned an editorial in response to the findings, chiding President Biden for not responding to this new sinister Russian threat with enough force. The Wall Street Journal called the report impressive. USA Today speculated that perhaps the mystery of Havana Syndrome's origins had been effectively, quote, solved. Now, on the other hand, some voices on both the right and left were less impressed, including Senator J.D. Vance of Ohio and progressive writer Jeet Heer. Now, one might have hoped that other media outlets, if not CBS News itself, would have probed the potential motivations of the people coming forward now. One of the key witnesses in the 60 Minutes report, former Pentagon investigator Greg Edgreen, has now started up a company seeking federal grant money to fund treatment programs for Havana Syndrome, a fact the report concedes at the very end of the segment. Then there's the Helping American Victims Afflicted by Neurological Attacks Act of 2021, Havana Act, get it? This law instructs the federal government to compensate victims of Havana Syndrome, cash payouts. As economists will always point out, if you want more of something, you subsidize it. So this report...
Sorry, wait, Robby, do you recognize me?
Where'd Brianna go? Yeah, someone, and forgive me for absolutely stealing this from someone else, but I saw someone joke that disguise was going to fool everyone who can't tell that Clark Kent and Superman are the same person.
Exactly.
Oh.
Exactly. Okay, so I was Googling some of the symptoms of Havana Syndrome while you were talking, and you're right, they are very common, sleep problems, dizziness, difficulty concentrating, hell's bells. I might have Havana Syndrome as I sit here today.
Well, because there's a Russian, it's over there.
Yeah.
Shooting you with an energy weapon. And look, I was reading more about the technology. It is not totally science fiction. It's not totally beyond reason that, and Russia and the US and China, we have spy programs and they're doing shady stuff behind closed doors. I'm not trying to be like totally in the dark about any of that. But the idea that you could, mostly they've used this technology, or we've used this technology for like crowd dispersal. The idea that you're gonna direct it at a specific person and like give them these symptoms without frankly burning, like causing third-degree burns, doesn't make a lot of sense.
Also, what is the kind of alleged desired outcome here, even if it could be targeted? Is the argument that we made some CIA officers that were focused on Russia so dizzy that the government stopped doing Russia investigation?
Why is Russia using this on these people instead? Why isn't it this weapon at the front lines in Ukraine? I mean, it starts to get very confusing. And their evidence was like, yeah, they got some diplomatic cables that show maybe some weapons research. There was this one Russian spy who was apprehended in Florida, or alleged Russian spy, and this woman lives in Florida. So it was kind of some pretty loose association stuff.
Russia's going to take down America by making just enough intelligence officers woozy and have difficulty concentrating. They're gonna ADHD the CIA into no longer focusing on Russia.
Yeah, it's just wild. And again, I'm not saying all of these people are like making it up or lying. People get sick. Diseases are very mysterious. People can have lingering, I mean, we've talked about this when we talk about long COVID. I mean, actually, people do have lingering complications you can have lingering complications from the flu or another respiratory issue or an infection or any number of things. And that's not all that uncommon. They've looked, the intelligence officials looked, the medical officials looked, and they just can't find a there. They find people with a range of symptoms that are explained by other factors. And then when they started looking at, it's called Havana Syndrome because it was started in Havana, that was actually crickets. The noise people were saying they heard that was causing these symptoms, it was literally crickets.
Maybe they just need to look under one of those fantastic disguises.
But I think this, speaks to, really the reason I was interested in it is the Russia of it all. Mainstream media reporting on Russian military schemes has just gotten so lazy. It's as if we're at the height of the Cold War once again. And maybe it was something about the political sides changing on Russia a little bit because of Donald Trump's perceived friendliness or lack of hostility toward Vladimir Putin. I mean, I think we can still all remember basically in like 2015, 2016, or whenever it was when suddenly all of liberal media became hawkish on Russia and all of conservative media became dovish on Russia, just a transformation that happened in a literal 24-hour period. So now, unfortunately, outlets that you can generally trust to do some good reporting and some not so good reporting, but some solid news reporting are now just paranoid about Russia's reach into our elections, into our social media platforms, into all of that.
I mean, I understand there was a kind of a shift, but it also feels like a minor shift compared to what has always been the case, which is a center establishment hawkishness and I don't mean to refer to them as fringe, but in either pole, I would call it senility, like just being reasonable about, or not having senility, being reasonable about the realities of the world, and not trying to use fear-mongering as a political cudgel, which seems to be what's going on here.
I thought more people would be mocking the sport, if not just for the disguise. I just don't, like, maybe we're missing something. Maybe underneath all of that makeup, it's like a black
small black man, exactly. Like, it's a complete opposite of what we're seeing there, and they should be applauded and given an Oscar for their costume work.
All right, best costume. We're gonna see if it's gonna be that. More Rising right after this.